Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhoads on the Buy Here Pay Here Morning Show. Take it away, you two.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, we're split screen today.
Well, it's because we're in two different states.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
So welcome, happy Monday, y'all.
Welcome to Monday. I am in broadcasting from Sedona. My best friend lives out here, and so enjoying a little bit of Sedona Red Rocks and flamenco music. And Jim headed home. He looks sad.
I'm so sad. I mean, I on the screen. I'm broadcasting from world headquarters in Ogden, Utah. So yeah.
Very good.
All good.
So I hope everybody had a great weekend. I've been watching stuff that's been happening on Facebook. There's been a couple of pretty interesting conversations, and there we have. And so there's a few things that are potentially brewing for topics coming up over the next few episodes. Just a special thank you to Jack Carter for joining us last Friday. We the power cord on our laptop had disengaged and our laptop went dead. So, and luckily it was like at the very, very, very end. And so we'd already kind of said goodbye. So, so those of you guys who stuck until then, thanks for your patience. I'm glad we were able to wrap up. You didn't get any of the exit music. Sorry.
Yeah. And shameless plug for Anna Maria back at Digital Attention Online. She turned around the editing on that video. So it's now out there on YouTube. I replaced it on YouTube. I can put it on the other channels as well, but the edited version is over there and available now. So poor Jack was sitting there like, where'd they go?
They froze.
Why rude?
I don't know. It's not on purpose.
Yeah, but shout out to him. And last week was a good week. We traveled. It's nice to be back in studio today. But yeah, it was a good week on the road, and lots of great meetings. We enjoyed our presentation in Arizona. That's out there, available also on YouTube. Where we talked a lot about being known, liked, and trusted, with a heavy emphasis on trust in the used car industry.
Yeah. It was a good topic. It's one that I've taken and carried into other conversations. It's just because I asked the question, can you trust someone that you know nothing? Trust someone with your money that you don't know,
or otherwise trust. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it was interesting, the polls that we did before, like this whole thing about, can you trust somebody without liking them? Like that's one that I look forward to continue to work through, but with our audiences as we speak and talk to people. But I'm learning that I may have to open my mind to new ideas so around that, and understand that some people can trust
without liking
the person.
But it does. I guess a deeper question into that is, if you trust them, you don't like them, when you have the opportunity to do business again in that world, would you step in again with the same person?
Or maybe just a referral. You have two people that you trust. One person you like, the other you don't. Which one is more likely to get that?
Those are great questions to ask.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to work through. But for today, it was more about just talking through numbers. And by the way, I've got a bunch of fun stuff. You mentioned all the dialogue on social lately, and there is a ton of that. And then there's also just some things that have come about that kind of provide new things for us to talk about. And that's always happening. I mean, there's just always fresh stuff, out there on the interweb, as I like to call it. So,
or the Google, which is
the Google,
Oracle.
Google. Anyway, just
okay. So today,
Mm-hmm.
I saw your, I read about it like everybody else did what the topic was, because it's like, Jim, I'm out of pocket, except I'll be there on Monday. So tell me about the topic. What was it that made you think about doing this?
Well, it's really a couple different things. There's there's a whole kind of parallel topic here, and we'll probably save this bigger subject for another day, but it's this idea that, when sometimes we make a mistake, and we all make mistakes, and certainly in business, we can make the mistake of one of the more recent conversations I had with a client was around this subject of, sometimes we make a mistake when we buy a car, and then we compound the mistake, that's the part that I feel like is more avoidable. Like, of course, we're going to make mistakes in buying cars. I mean, used cars are just used cars. It's the nature of it. You're going to miss some, and you're going to have some that you overspend. And so that's kind of what set this conversation in motion. And then it's, also kind of follow on to the conversation we had during the live stream back on the 1st with Brent Carmichael, and this thing about down payment, what it really means in our business, the idea that most lenders, including buy here, pay here dealers, are still leaning heavily on ability, the customer's ability to pay. And so that's part of what I wanted to illustrate.
Well, I just give you my thoughts. Ability is, I know that in the industry we have certain things that we know because there's been a lot of numbers and there's been a lot of data about, it's a good idea that someone make at least this much because you're talking PTI and all of that kind of stuff. But there's also different parts of ability to pay that I think are subjective.
Okay.
And it's, that potentially are, they're not backed up with data, but they're backed up with ideas about people, ideas about zip codes,
right?
Ideas about, there's a lot of different things that I've witnessed. And it's like, we keep telling our clients that, we'll do a discovery call and they're like, you don't understand, our customer's different. And it's like,
yeah.
Are they? And
I know the answer. They're not.
They're not. And so, when it all comes down to it with the math, they're not. And so it just, when you hear some people say, I won't do this area, I won't do someone that fits this profile, which you would never write down and you would never verbalize to anyone on your team because that is a compliance issue.
Yeah.
About certain things. So it's just, I think that the ability, if we go based on numbers, the ability is that's going to show you something that's more truthful than the gut.
And I think ability would suggest, and we'll get into it when we show the spreadsheet, but I think the ability would mean really the customer's income and the ability to make a payment, whatever that payment looks like, whatever that ratio looks like. But I also think that, in our industry, I'd be interested to know the percentage. I don't think anybody's got it, but like just anecdotally, I'd like to hear from dealers, like what percentage of the customers that you think finance with you are still on the same job in 3 years? A lot of our dealers have notes running longer than 36 months now, but are they still on the same job? So,
well, you can't say that unless a dealer's measuring that. And there's a lot of dealers out there that they don't ask the question. We talked to Maggie and Maggie's like, are you still here? Are you employment? And there's a lot of dealers that just don't. So the only information they have about employment is what they collected when they.
And not everybody's putting in income in the DMS. So you can't really go back and study. That's one of the things that we ran into in preparing for that event on August 1st was you can't really study PTI much because most DMS systems aren't capturing income, at least not in a really dependable way. And while they may have a field for it, that doesn't mean that the people always put it in because it's probably not required to contract the deal. So my point is you just don't always have enough income information, but we do know we have enough history over the years to know that, the experts in the industry that were around long before I came into it are basically say that, your PTI ratio is something to lean on pretty heavily. So that's just one piece. The interesting thing about doing a Foursquare, as I've loaded up here today, is that it helps to kind of break down those individual pieces and see the impact of them, on a single screen. So that's kind of the idea. Shall we jump into the spreadsheet?
Yeah. Do you want me to put it up or are you going to put it up?
Please. Yeah. If you want to get it, I've got it ready to show. And I think what this is just, at the end of the day, it's just a calculation tool. And, for those not familiar with a Foursquare, there's some variations on this, but generally speaking, in our industry, I think this is what you'd be looking at. And I've got numbers loaded on there that I was just toying around with, to just test and look at the impact of some of these things. So backing up to, Foursquare's terminology has been around for 100 years. It's basically this idea. It used to be done on paper. And just a quick shout out to some of the folks I used to work with, Randall Hill. If somebody knows him, tap Randall Hill. He's probably not on Facebook, but Randall Hill I used to work with when I was a sales manager. He was general manager and did a lot of desking deals. And I watched him and learned a lot from him. Maury Richardson in Oklahoma City, also watched them desking deals. And I can still see, Maury running around with a big green Sharpie writing out these Foursquare. Foursquare is basically going to have these components. It's going to have, that selling price that it shows up there. Then the down payment. So again, you can see how a salesperson would sit with somebody and write this stuff out and negotiate with a customer. Here's the price of the car that we've chosen. Here's the down payment that, if you're financing. And then here's the payment we're looking for. In this case, I chose to have that resulting term, the length of contract, shown in gray there, because that's sort of my own code that's a formula. We don't change that. We change these numbers in yellow, and the resulting term there comes out this way. So this is, and let me just change some numbers, because I think what's more representative of maybe the typical buy here.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a pretty, and honey, I love it when you do the spreadsheets and have all the formulas and can start playing with the different numbers and just watching. I do.
You're more nerdy than
No, I'm the wife of a nerd.
Yeah, there you go.
But when you had that 89, I was like, that's kind of low for what it is that a lot of our dealers do. But yeah.
So let's back up and just we've talked about some of this in the past. Let's kind of string it all together. Obviously with COVID and some other factors, car costs jumped up sharp. A lot of dealers wanted to maintain a certain amount of gross profit. So they marked up their cars that same amount to maintain a certain dollar amount of gross, which meant that car prices jumped up too. Well, now we have to start kind of, tweaking the financing terms, because we've got to make it all fit. And so I think what we start to look at is the actual, math behind the scenes on some of this. And this is just straightforward math. In fact, I hid a lot of this just to, not make it so messy, but let me just kind of quickly show the viewers what's kind of happening behind the scenes. These are other inputs. You can put in the sales tax, doc fee. I did leave out for now. In fact, I'll just raise this up to allow for it. I did leave out sort of tax, title, and license, but it doesn't matter where it is, just as long as you kind of get it in the financing. But if a typical dealer has a $200 doc fee and another $200 in tag and title related, like transfer fees, et cetera, then that could go in there. I use 24% interest to start here, and I've got a number down here for the customer's net income. I'll just leave those open so that can be seen.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because I think it would also be interesting to show when you throw in a different income, what happens.
Yeah. So a couple other quick things. There's some other calculations over here. I have to move over to show the sales tax calculated and then the amount financed with the add-ons put in there. So this one I'll show you in a minute. This is that payment to income ratio. So, but before we get into that, let me kind of get back over here to, here's our selling price. We're not going to change that. Our down payment from the customer is what it is. Obviously, we're going to negotiate for as much as we possibly can. And yes, if you had a trade, the net trade would go in here. Just lump it in there. The math is all going to turn out the same. Just use the net trade figure after allowing for any payoff. And then now we've got a desired payment. And this is the part, Michelle, where it gets tricky with dealers, because I see dealers, and this part we've talked about some in the past, is like, I see dealers trying to fit a contract to a certain term. And I'm not sure where that comes from. I think if any dealers are listening and they have that as practice, I would ask, where's that come from? Why are you choosing to try to fit all your contracts into a specific term? Because I think that's part of where we get off track. with this
Mhm.
is if we're trying to make it fit a term, then the results can be, if I'm a salesperson, I can say, well, we have to try to keep contracts around 36 months. So the price of the car you've chosen, your payment is now $675 a month. Well, the customer, what we have to first understand about the customer is that the customer's in a tough spot. And if you're
Mhm.
saying to the customer, I'll approve you on this $15,000 car with
Mhm.
$1,500 down today, and your payment will be X. What they hear is, I'm approved and I can get the car today with 1,500 down. Great. I'll figure out the rest
Yeah,
later.
yeah, exactly.
That's where
Exactly.
it ends for a lot of the customers that we work with.
Uh-huh.
And so they're in a tough
Uh-huh.
spot. We have to remember that. And so if I slide a contract out in front of them and say, good news, you're approved. I can do this deal for a payment of 675. They may have a lump in their throat, but they can still sign the contract with a lump in their throat and they'll figure out how to come up with the money later. So this is
Mhm.
the part that I think we have to be watchful about. And this is why I say, couple things I really want to focus on here. Let's kind of keep the selling price at, for the purpose of our conversation. Let's keep the selling price where it is, and we can kind of mess around with the down payment over here, and we can toy around with the payment. But I think that $1,500 down is pretty typical. I want to have a whole conversation around down payment. First, I want to talk about the payment amount and look at what that means for us in term. So we the thing I added to this just for a kind of a quick glance situation is if you take that payment and you multiply it times 5,
Mhm.
that number is $2,250. So the reason that's important is because virtually all the experts that I've worked with in the industry kind of agree around a payment to income ratio of 20%.
And that's what that is.
Yeah. So what you want to see, what this tells me, if I set that payment at $450 a month, that means my customer's take home pay needs to be around $2,250 for this to reach that 20%
Yeah.
ratio. Okay. So that's why that's there. I threw that on there just to say, let's have a quick look at that before we start pushing this payment up. If we're going to target 20%, and 20% is just one reference, you can do more than that. It's just a quick reference to say, this is where you need to be income wise to support that
Mhm.
kind of payment. Okay. Now that can be the entire family. It might be a, husband, wife, co-buyer, whatever. It could be, multiple buyers, but this is the income that we need to be able to show in order to reach a 20% ratio. So I think this is why I kind of like the idea of just playing in these squares, because there are certain things that aren't going to change.
Do
We're
you
Go ahead.
do you like this is something that is forward facing for our customers. And I do have to shout out to, and I haven't learned how to use it yet. Neo now has a Foursquare in their program, and I'm not exactly sure how it works yet
Mhm,
because I haven't been trained on it. But I obviously there were enough dealers
mhm.
that were requesting something like that, which
Uh,
is why they created it. But there are a lot of people are visual learners,
mhm.
and this I think is really great to put in front of a customer, even the entire thing. And it's just like, so here's what it is that we're trying to do, because we know that we need to be able to keep it to here and keep it to here and keep it to here. And I think personally this is a great tool to say the car that you want is outside of your range, but let's say if we did this car instead, now everything works.
Mhm. Yeah, so, thank you. I'm glad you think it's a useful tool. I agree that it would be, and
Mhm.
this is the kind of nerd that I am. Instead of going, some people go garage sailing on Sunday. I built this yesterday, so,
Uh-huh.
that's kinda
You
what.
mowed the lawn
Yeah.
and built a tool.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't do this until the yard was mowed. Yeah, that's for sure. But
Uh,
no, I think what we're working with is
mhm.
some things that are locked down. And I
Mhm.
think this is why it's important for us to really think about, and we really focus on these fields in yellow, and
Mhm.
then we have to have a big question mark around that lower right-hand box, which is our term.
Yeah. Well, and I would like to point another thing out, if I may.
Please.
And you know how we say our customers they're the same across the board, and most customers, or pretty much so, yeah, most of our customers um, can be comfortable and with a payment that's 450, 500.
Most.
Yeah, at most.
But I think that's part of where,
Yeah.
by the way, when you saw the 89.95 on the screen, I was just kind of toying with the math to figure out how affordable would a car have to be for me to be able to get to that 350 a month payment that everybody seems to want. It used to be 250, and then now it's
Mm-hmm.
people come in asking for 350. And the reality is, you're right. Well, this is why we can show them, but they're still a variable. I would just simply say I haven't seen Neo's Foursquare in action. I don't know how
I
it
haven't
works,
either yet, so
but I think one of the
report on
things.
that one. I do.
So I think customer facing thing. There's not anything that we're working with here that we couldn't turn the screen around or
Mhm.
show a second screen and have the customer watch what we're doing, because this is not anything related to cost. This is just about the terms of financing, and so it's just being able to show the customer on the screen, here's how it would work. Now, in some of the other tools that I've created, and I'll eventually get this one to the place where it does something similar, is a dealer could put in their preferences on contract length. And so what would happen is, for example, on some of the others I built, that when this contract, let's say the dealer has a target term of 48 months max. Well, then this might say that might turn red when that number's above a certain uh,
Mhm.
range. So the customer can see, and unfortunately, that looks like that particular. So what can I do? Let's say this is red because I'm over 48 months. Well, the ways to solve that there is in these boxes, these 3 boxes. That's the only way I can shorten
Mhm.
that term. I'm not going to change the interest rate. I'm not going to change the customer's income, right?
Mhm.
So that basically
And
means
yeah.
sales tax is not going to change. I'm not going to be able to negotiate with the state to get a better sales tax rate. So
Mhm.
the reality is, I can only choose to move this term by moving these other yellow boxes. Now, before we do go any further, though, on that,
And well, and to say the selling price doesn't change for that car, but the car may change.
right, we change the car exactly. So that's
Mhm.
why I think most dealers do not negotiate buy here, pay here pricing. I wouldn't recommend it. I think with in the typical mainstream buy here, pay here, we always have to remember there are dealers out there who have matured in their operation to a point where they have the ability to negotiate pricing, they can negotiate term, so that happens. But
Mhm.
by and large, most of the dealers that we work with are not in that situation, and it's really problematic to change
Mhm.
pricing. So
Mhm.
once the price is set, the price is set. So we're at 14,995. So for a conversation today, I say we stay at 14,9. All right.
Okay.
And now the we just have to work with the down payment, and we work with the payment amount to try to get that. Well, let's say I've worked with a customer all I can on down payment. That's all they've got. There's nothing more. We can't go any
Mhm.
further on that. It is what it is. So that means we're financing roughly what 13.5 plus these add-ons, right?
Mhm.
Now
Mhm.
we just have to push the payment. So I can try, well, let's look at 500. Well, 500 took me down to 45 months. Maybe that's where I'm trying
It's
to
still
be.
not 20% though.
Oh, the income?
Uh-huh.
Yes, it's true. That's because I've loaded over here. This is changeable. I mean, I can change whatever
Mhm.
this is, and you can see this one I've done. Like it shows in green, and I know I need to shrink the screen down just a little bit, but it shows in green over there the
Mhm.
the payment ratio. When I change that, and I'll show you a little more. If I go 550, you can see that number now. The payment is still within the ratio. It's green because it's still within
Mhm.
that income. But if I drop this down, let's say you can see that the target income right there is 2750. So if I
Mhm.
drop this down to 2500, then you can see, turns orange. We're getting
Mhm.
into a little higher
Mhm.
ratio. And if I go down even further, see how much, oops, that goes not 200 a month,
Yeah.
2000. Then you can see it turns red. Now we're in danger zone. We're pushing up to, and these were settings that the dealer can choose whatever the target's going to be. But basically, I'm just trying to be able to show the customer on the screen. And this is the
Mhm.
part that I think is a variable for dealers. And this is what I recommend. And I've talked about this before, and I've had dealers kind of push back on this idea. I talk a lot about with used cars and
Mhm.
financing like this, reasonable life expectancy. And so I'm not going to go off into all that again, but I can just say that, when you think about what is the life expectancy of this car,
Mhm.
well, that's the part that if I were the chief underwriter, if I'm the dealer or final decision maker on underwriting, that's the variable that I would be
Mhm.
leaving in. It's like, going back to our, ninth grade math class is like there's variables. You solve for X, right? And so
Mhm.
have this number, we can't change this. We have this number, We've done all we can. Obviously, it helps the customer. And I love to approach a customer and say, I can give you 3 reasons why putting more down payment is going to be beneficial to you. Okay. So we can go through that another time. But basically, it's just like, why, if I've done all I can do, I've 1,500 is all I'm going to have today. If I'm doing business today, and I would suspect that we are, if the customer's, prepared to buy a car, then we're going to move forward. But now I just have to experiment with this payment and keep it relative to their income. Now I could say, oh, I'm trying to get to 36 months with every customer. We try to keep the financing to 36 months. Okay, well, let's look at 600 a month. Okay, so that did it. Looks like more like 575 might get us there. Okay, so what happened? I just pushed the customer to a higher payment because I'm trying to fit it in the term that is my policy or my practice. And so now I just push the customer up in term. And I would just say that, well, yeah, we gotta be able to make it work to fit for the customer. And I would just say, we got to be careful about this term thing. So, because what it does is it makes us push that payment up. And if we're not super watchful about our PTI, which again, all the experts say that's the heaviest predictor of success on these contracts we write, is going to be that ability, which is really PTI. So when we push the customer too high on PTI, shame on us. It's like, this is back to that thing about, we sometimes make mistakes and we didn't make the mistake maybe by buying or pricing the car at 14.9. That's a whole separate conversation, separate show. It's like, but regardless, if the price is where it needs to be on that car, then we just are limited by these numbers. This we're negotiating with the customer. This we're negotiating with the customer.
The down payment, the desired payment.
Yeah.
Because they don't really, our customers are not really going to care how long, because, for whatever reasons.
And I think I can make the case that dealers would benefit by learning to care less about that. And so I think and again, whole separate tangent that I look forward to diving into, but my basis for that is really, why do I care if this customer has a more affordable payment? Back to 500, I'm still at 25%. Let's say I go to 475. That's 24%. It's a little above what they say is a good target, but we look at it, their rent is low. We decide we can stand a 24% PTI. And so now I'm looking at 48 months on this contract. And I would say, do I like a 48-month contract on something that is, let's say it's a 10-year-old car with 130,000 miles. Do I like that? I think that's the decision that I need to be prepared as the underwriter. I need to be prepared to make that decision in terms of where we end up. And I see Tyler Simmons.
Tyler chimed in. Really interesting approach. I hate old school Foursquare, but this modern version is actually pretty great. And as a dealer, you're being transparent. That, I think, thank you. That's a white hat way thing.
Tyler's in an operation does it. So that's a nice thing to hear from you, Tyler, because I know Tyler's in an operation that does a pretty good amount of volume. He works with a lot of customers in exactly this way. They're sitting at a screen doing it. And there's nothing here that I'm doing that the customer can't see. And look, most of us are visual. I'm verifying that I'm not the only one.
Our customers are going to be visual too.
And I think I can show them, like, especially in color. And this to me is to show both. I can show the customer when I get the color added here. Imagine what that's going to look like whenever I can show the customer, hey, this contract length, that's a little long. And so, obviously the car's got miles and we don't want to see a fail. So I can sit here and have this conversation with the customer. And that's why that turned orange, because the contract length gets a little long. This car's got some miles and we don't want to see the car fail before you get to the end of the notes. So I'm on their side. Like, I'm just trying to help. Let's make it successful for everybody here. And so the other piece that we can probably just save for another day is this idea that, if I did this deal with, instead of $1,500 down, let's say that I'm going to do this with $1,000 down, and dealers will say, gosh, that's, I've got dealers, averaging
a lot of more risk on the road. Doesn't even cover my sales tax.
Yeah. We've met dealers who do 2,500 on average. Certainly $2,000 is a number. People talk about payment percentage of selling price, which I think is important. But at the end of the day, what I would really like to illustrate here is that if this customer came forward on a $14,995 car, and let's keep their income under that 25%, which we're there now. We've got a customer who's got a $2,000 net income. And so we keep the payment there. And if I drop this down payment from 500 or from 1,500 to 1,000, so roughly one car payment, then that pushed my term 3 months. So I think this is an important one. And this one we can dig into a little more later. But
Mm-hmm.
because I think what in our conversation with Brent Carmichael on that event on the first, I verified with him. I've always been able to say to our clients that down payment is the biggest influencer on volume, in my experience. Tyler Simmons, if
Mm-hmm.
you're still listening, tell me if you feel differently. But when I can move the down payment and make the car more attainable, then I can get more customers in them and I will have more volume typically. So this is why this becomes important and why watching the term, because I could say, no, Jim, that's not enough down payment, right? That's not enough down payment. I can't make the math work. I have too much risk. So I would just say, okay, let's go back to that one number, $1,500 down. You're going to wait for $1,500 down as an example. That means the car's not going to sell today, maybe. And now, instead of, I'm looking at a 4-year relationship with this customer. So that 1,500 down, and we're just picking numbers today. This numbers can be adjusted any way you wish. They can be, we can adjust your own model. But when I move that down payment by that amount, and I agree to approve the customer, because all my other underwriting says this customer is well qualified, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
all that's happening is they're a little short on down payment. So what's the big difference? I'm taking a 30-day risk. Now, if the customer never makes their first payment and they skip and they cancel their insurance and wreck it or run off to Hawaii, if they drove the car to Hawaii, so if they disappear, then you know that that what's going to happen is they're going to say, well, yeah, I wish I'd had another $500 down. It would have reduced my risk and my loss by $500. Absolutely true. But that's plain almost from scarcity. That's like the customer is going to fail. Well, if we expect the customer is going to succeed, then $1,000 down today, we're going to have the rest of that down payment in like 30 days. Yes, the payment's going to start.
It's an interesting thing. Can I squirrel just real quick?
Yeah.
Kind of squirrel. When we're talking to new clients, and especially ones that we're putting into business, and they're like, what should my X be? What should my this be? What should my this be? The first question that Jim usually asks is, how do you want to be known by your customer?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a question that should go right alongside is, do you want our customers to be successful?
Yeah.
Because our dealers we're in complete control of how we put together a deal. And because it's completely up to us. We're the bank. We have no parameters other than our own, in essence, unless you've got covenants and all of that through your lenders. But we're the bank. And so do you want your customer to be successful? And I wonder, and I think that you referred to this just a little bit earlier, is there's not a lot of DMSs that are measuring parts of this, like the income and all of that. And it makes me wonder if there are any dealers out there. I know some of the clients that Maggie works with, they verify the job, and so the job time and all that kind of stuff. But if there are any dealers out there that consistently update and measure income and like their job, those kind of things, and that they have numbers that have tracked those kind of things, I'd be so highly interested to see that, because if you could look at those things, then it's quantifiable. It's the numbers don't lie. So to say that if we keep it at 20% versus 25%, and we can measure at 20% consistently, this is how many people are successful. At 25% consistently, this is how successful are our customers. At 15%, this is how successful the customer is.
Mhm.
And so, if it's a question to ask, if you could quantify that, and you knew that if you kept it at 17.5% of your income, because your success rate would go up 3 points,
Mhm.
4 points, would you do it?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think the other part of this for me is just looking at, and by the way, you mentioned the thing about um, how customers perceive it, do they trust us, whatever. I think what you could hear in me, and I've done a lot of these,
Mhm.
presentations to customers. I created something we call the down payment worksheet, which is a little like a pre-app qualification sheet, kind of just does some calculations like this. And you just walk through it with the customer.
Mhm.
And what the customer will hear from me is one, super flexible. I'm just, we're trying to make it work. So, what they're going to hear from me is a lot of flexibility and trying to make it fit. And
Mhm.
if we work through it and we work through it, and at the end of the day, we can't get there, we can't get there. But it's not going to be for lack of trying to find a
Mhm.
solution. And so what this tool does is help
Mhm.
me to work through that with the customer on the screen. They can see what I'm trying to do. They can see that when I only do, 350 a month payment,
Yeah.
this is why I can't do a 350 a month payment. Just show them when we do 350 a month, because
That's
unfortunately,
101 months.
right. Yeah. So, it's like you just show the customer that's going to turn red and start to flash. There's going to be smoke coming out of the computer. It's like, it won't work. It
So
won't work.
are you going to make this available to our listeners?
I would love to. There's some work to be done because I think a lot of these things, as you know, there's a little bit of a training thing. Like I just created this one yesterday, so there's a
Mhm.
little bit in order to create it. I almost have to create a training video to go along with it
Mhm.
because they'll either break it. I have to be able to log it, whatever. But
So what I'm kind of hearing is, if you're interested in getting access to this, just let us know, and we can figure that out from there, because it is, like Tyler said, very transparent, and when you can, like, really play with the things and say, let's find the thing that works the best, and educate our customers that here are the things that we're trying to make sure happen. We're trying to keep your PTI percentage at a certain level.
right.
And so, and you're with, yeah. And they can watch how just a little bit of massaging, and even sometimes if you've got the $1,000 down payment, and if you did 1250, how that it's just, can you come up with an extra $250, because that's just going to make everything work.
For down payment.
Yeah, or whatever it
Yeah, yeah,
is.
whatever. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think it's just an example of, and we can illustrate this, and I'll just remind everybody before we wrap up that APR is set at 24%. So it's just an easy thing to be transparent, show the customer here's what it is. And so you could even have that one kind of in gray or whatever, so people can see that.
It also allows you to show on something like this, they're doing a down payment and saying, your sales tax is more than what you're paying for down payment, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And just really, really, and so or even being able to say, hey, would you be able to at least do enough down to cover your sales tax?
You definitely can. It was whatever. That's a technique in my mind. That's a
Yeah.
training technique that we can use to
Mhm.
ask the customer for more down payment. But what I'm really suggesting is we're going to ask for the customer for all the down payment commitment we get. Why? Because
Mhm.
it helps them. It gives them,
It does.
it ultimately reduces their financing with the amount that they finance, which reduces their finance charges. It increases the chance of approval. I mean, they're just, it can help to lower the payment.
Mhm.
So I need, as a dealer, I know that I need down payment for me. So if I'm a salesperson, sales manager, dealer, I'm asking
Mhm.
the customer for more down payment because I know I need it for me. But customer's not going to do it to help me.
Yeah.
Customers will do it to help themselves. So I'm going to give them reasons why. Here's why some more down payment would be
Yeah.
helpful. Now, if you can't do more down payment, maybe we need to go look at something, because I know this payment is important to you. If we can go choose a car that's a little more affordable, maybe we can find something on the lot that's priced here. And dealers don't have a lot of that kind of inventory anymore, frankly. But if you do, then, and if you could bump that payment a little bit, if you could get to there, then this is a little more workable deal. That's still pretty long. This 10.9 car has got more miles on it. That's part of why it's more affordable. So, we still have a problem, but it's a little more workable. It's still gonna, but the reason I think
Mhm.
it's important, if we say nothing else here with dealers today, is I would say, the down payment, as we know, is not necessarily the predictor of success that we once believed it was. And so I think dealers need to be able to measure that themselves. And then we would also say that, by
Mhm.
by being flexible in that part, you're going to potentially create more volume. And then now we just have a way to show the customer on the screen, this is what we're really kind of working against. We be for your sake and for ours, we need to try to keep this contract as short as possible. You don't want to end up, still the car is getting some miles on it and you still owe a lot. We all want to avoid that situation. So it's like I'm on the customer side here. We're trying to work through this and find a solution. And so now if you could bump that payment to, let's say, 390, now it just shortens the term a little bit more. It's going to increase my chances of being able to get the financing approved for you today.
And
So
that takes you exactly to the 20%. Yeah.
exactly. I'm just playing with the numbers, and this is what the tool is really designed to do, is be able to show, how that would work. But let's just do it on the fly. And I would say, if you're a dealer listening to this and you say, man, I wish my DMS had this, reach out to them, share this episode and tell them, I'd be happy to work with them to help, create this thing. Cause I think every DMS ought to have this in a way that I could turn the screen around and show the customer on the screen exactly what we're working with and kind of what the boundaries are, so they can understand. Look, I'm happy to help you, but I think it validates a little bit, instead of me being, some crooked salesperson, right? That's always the perception, that I'm not trustworthy as a salesperson. So now when I can do this, and it's like, this is the math, the machine is doing the math, and this turned orange because this is outside our policy. Doesn't mean it never happens. It just, now if it's red, it's probably not going to happen.
In closing, because we do need to wrap up. George asked the question: how do you respond to the commonly recited axiom of down payment doesn't predict a successful loan?
We're just kind of sharing what the data suggests. And I would say there's some information out there. We've got some podcasts now that we've recorded with, we got Naveen Batija from Neo has been on the Tote the Note podcast with us before, and he kind of speaks to those things. I would say down payment is still very much it's a cash management matter. Like and yes, it's real cash exposure, but that's different. That's a different conversation. That's yes, you can say that getting more down payment is going to reduce your cash exposure and is going to help you manage your cash in the business. But that's not the same thing as saying that it's going to predict more success. And we meet a lot of dealers who still do that, and they say that, and I don't know if their data really supports that, or that just makes them feel better that a customer's got more commitment. But to say that is one thing, and go to the data and see if the data really supports that. And what I'm really suggesting is, there's just so many elements to this, Michelle. It's like, we just kind of had a conversation on social media about this thing, and it keeps coming up about the thing about, length of loan and all these kind of things being a factor. I didn't finish saying, by the way, when we're showing the numbers, that the reason I'm saying we should be flexible about the term of loan and look at a deal that's 45 months with the expectation the customer's not going to pay all the way to 45 months anyway. I'm going to trade them in at about 25, 30 months.
That's a whole nother topic.
So now it's just a question of getting them to a down payment, a payment that is workable, and then just watching the miles on the car and watching the customer's performance and expecting to trade them out. So this is why it's important for us to analyze that math and see, is that going to make sense? Because my expectation, this is again why I think when we're solving for X, the X should be the term of loan. That it should be, that's the thing that we should be setting out there
I started that a little bit early, didn't I? Yes.
Anyway, I just think that's the part that we have to be watchful about, because the rest of these numbers, anything else means that we're either putting a customer in a car that's too expensive, or we're pressing them too hard on down payment and payment, and that's a bad recipe. So
absolutely.
Anyway, there's so much more to talk about. I could stay here all day. I know you have to be someplace.
I don't, but all right. Well, Wednesday, White Hat Wednesday. I think that Jim and I'll be back home tomorrow night, so be back in the home studio. So yeah, if there's any dealers out there that are collecting these data points and have been doing it for a while so that they can actually track the full course of a loan, we would really love to get your insight and input on that. absolutely. So, and also, we did put out the thing last Wednesday when we had Candace on. Is if you know of a fellow colleague dealer that is really just really connecting with their community, with their customer, and are someone that we would want to do a tip of the hat for White Hat Way, let us know. We would love to be able to hear their story. We'd love to be able to try to get them on the show,
Mhm.
and to be able to talk about what it is that's been successful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds
All
great.
right.
And so, yeah, we'll do that. I've got some ideas for White Hat Wednesday this week, so
Oh,
tune in for
awesome.
that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so we got lots of stuff lined up. We need to get back and talk about the
All
dealer
right.
panels too. So, I think we did put a poll quickly. Don't push the button yet. We
Okay.
did. Yeah, we did put a poll out there about which,
Huh.
if we were to start doing panels on the morning show, which would folks most like to hear? And the responses last I saw were overwhelmingly in favor of dealer panels.
Overwhelmingly in favor of dealer panels. And it
Yeah.
was interesting. Some of the comments were like, yeah, if you're going to have vendors, no pitching.
Yeah. So I
So,
think we
yeah,
can bring some dealers together and talk about this particular
yeah,
topic. I
yeah,
think it could be a good panel discussion about term of loan and all that. There's so much. So I think
yeah.
we'll figure that out and figure out how to get some dealers together.
Yeah, we've gone a little long today. Thanks, guys, for everyone for hanging in there with us. And just from this conversation, there's a lot of other things that we can work on unpacking and have some fun having a conversation about. Again, if you are interested in getting access or having Jim kind of show you through how to build your own tool, even let us know, and we
Yeah,
can do what we can do to help you. All right.
absolutely.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much for
Yeah.
joining us.